Hello and welcome to another episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. I'm really excited today. We're going to dive into a set of oils that are my favorites. We're exploring fir, Liz.
Yes, and I just said to Adam, guys, I feel like I'm dressed for the occasion. I have a silver fir snotty nose. I'm full of cold, so apologies for the fact that I probably don't even sound right today.
Oh, that's right. We'll truck on through it, won't we? And we've got to because it's fir, and I'm not going to let us delay this another day.
No.
No. So I guess the first thing we should look at when we say fir essential oil, there is a whole family of fir essential oils. So I know probably the two that I work with the most would be Douglas fir and Siberian fir. But there's also white fir, sometimes known as silver fir as well, Himalayan fir, and also balsam fir, which is quite generous. It doesn't just give us an oil from the needles, but you can actually get it from the bark as well. So there's a whole range of different fir oils that are really exciting, and that they'll have some subtle differences, but we're going to look at a whole gamut today. Liz, which ones do you work with?
So you asked me this earlier, and I said Douglas fir and Siberian fir, but also, actually, most of all, I work with silver fir. But so I don't know the answer to this, and I should have looked this up. Are they different species, or are they different, or are they just fir trees that grow different chemistry from different parts of the world? I don't know the answer to that. Do you?
They are different species, so they have
Yeah.
different Latin names. And even I think the Douglas fir isn't an exact type of fir. It's got a slightly different Latin name as well.
All right.
So
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, they all kind of come into that group of fir family. So from your background, I guess you're saying that they do have similar-ish chemistry, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And what I find fascinating is, well, I often talk about how I'm like a so square. I've got favourite molecules, and I normally talk
Mm-hmm.
about how I love beta caryophyllene the most. But I have to say, this year it's been outdone by alpha-pinene. The research that's coming out of the labs about alpha-pinene is really getting exciting, I think. But certainly Siberian fir, which is the one that I've been doing most research on for a ghostwriting contract, is interesting to me because obviously we call them alpha-pinene and beta-pinene, presumably because alpha-pinene is predominant and then beta-pinene is secondary to that. But in Siberian fir, and I never really got a chance to look at the other GCMSs to see, but beta-pinene is the predominant one. And I will talk about it later on as we go through, because I don't want it to be the first thing we talk about. But there's really interesting things that beta-pinene can do globally. And it makes me think, oh, nature's created this tree differently for that usage. So we'll talk about that later on.
Awesome. Because I did want to ask you about beta-pinene, because alpha normally gets all the attention. You hear a lot of people talking about that. But yeah, one of the oils I work with as well is very high in beta-pinene. So yeah. So when you're working with the firs, how on a physical level, what do you find they're great for?
So it isn't an oil that I use for that many things. I like it for stuffy noses. So I won't wave it under my nose because it's not a very pleasant appearance today, but I have it on my tissue today for stuffy noses. I really like it for aches and pains, and I will talk about that separately. I find it very useful if you like combine it with things like cypress and tea tree for urinary tract infections. But also there's really interesting research into how it affects the nervous system. And again, I'll talk about that separately, but I use it quite a lot for like people's emotional and mental conditions. So snotty noses is obvious. I think it's best used as an inhalant, and by that I mean like a steam inhalant. So I would probably not use it that much for unblocking the sinuses per se. I'd probably use something like myrrh or lemon to actually do that work. But actually getting into the nose and getting into the blood system and down into the lungs via inhalation is really helpful. So I like to use the old towel over the head for that. And what's interesting actually is, I don't know how long we're going back now, maybe 8 years, something like that. And I always have to go and check if I get with the doctor if I get a cough or a bad cold, because of I talk about it a lot. I'm a thrombophiliac, so my blood thickens, so it can sometimes be a symptom of having another blood clot in my lungs. So I have to go and like get them checked out quite often. And I saw a new doctor the one day, and she said, "Oh, I'm not going to give you anything for that, but do you know anything about aromatic oils? You could perhaps use some fir to shift that." And I was like, "Whoa, the doctor's even recommending it now," so that was good. And she wasn't even slightly impressed by who I said I was. So that was rude, but still.
We're impressed, Liz. We're impressed by who you are.
Thank you. I was like, she went, anyway. Okay, right. But so I thought that was interesting that even the doctor sends you away to deal with coughs and colds now with fir and pine oils as well as eucalyptus. So I talked about aches and pains, and alpha-pinene is really well researched now as the predominant idea that the doctors have for a better treatment for people who have osteoarthritis. And so I need to do a bit of science to make this easy to understand. We're going to talk about a thing called chondrocytes. Chondrocytes are the cells that make up collagen. Collagen lives between our bones in the cartilaginous places. It forms a layer so that bones have an easy cushion to move. In osteoarthritis, that breaks down. And they've discovered that alpha-pinene actually helps regenerate new chondrocytes. So if they've broken down and they're not repairing, and that's part, osteoarthritis, if people don't know, is the main form of arthritis, very painful. And usually because there's been overusage on the joints. So when I used to go to ballet, we weren't allowed to click our fingers because they said that would give us arthritis. And now my boys both go, "Oh, look, we're clicking." And I'm like, "Please don't do it. You'll have arthritis before you're 30. And they think it's hilarious. But they love the fact that now they can say, "Yeah, but we've got alpha-pinene now," and just walk out the room. But so this is able to regenerate the tissue that protects the joints. What's really interesting is alpha-pinene also has an analgesic action through a weak interaction with the mu receptors. So those are the same ones that, for example, myrrh uses, and they're what morphine uses, opioids use, heroin, all of those things. Very weak. It's a very weak interaction. But what they found is the levels of analgesia are nowhere near comparable to morphine, but they last longer. So if somebody takes morphine, the pain-killing effect will be around about 30 minutes, but alpha-pinene will give a pain-killing effect for around about 150 minutes, which is much, much longer. They were also able to ascertain that there are certain other chemicals that will make it work better on lots of different levels, not just this mu receptor, lots of different levels. So these are limonene. So if you combine it with another oil that has limonene, you will potentialize it. Potentiate is a better word. I am going to sneeze in a minute, guys. Sorry, I can feel it. Cymene, a paracymene, and also 1,8-cineol. So combining those with that will help to improve the analgesia. And of course, I've already given you a clue of another oil to use. Myrrh is proven to be about 1/10 of the strength of morphine. So that is strong, using the same receptor. So you could really do something clever there with painkilling. Another trial also wanted to ascertain the bioavailability of a particular constituent, and not necessarily how much there was of it, but how much you could make available for the body to use. And when they put 1,8-cineol next to alpha-pinene and a mouse. A mouse inhaled it for 30 minutes. The alpha-pinene was found in the brain after 30 minutes, so that's really fast. 3 times as much alpha-pinene was found to 1/8 So if you have got a cold and you feel miserable, this is a really good way to influence your brain faster than using eucalyptus. It will make,
and that's not, and people would often go for eucalyptus as the first option for a cold, wouldn't they? Yeah,
and it would probably be better for unblocking the nose. But if you mix it with fir or something high in alpha-pinene, then the effects on, I'm starting to feel like I could go to work now. And actually, I'll get to why I'm going to say that in a minute. But particularly if you're a man, and I will explain why I said that later. But if you are a guy and you feel miserable for a cold, then it possibly should be the first one that you would go for your emotional content. And as I say, I want to address that separately. Also, they were able to show that alpha-pinene is extraordinary for neuropathic pain, specifically in a model for sciatica. And the reason why they think that this is so effective is because we talked about the interaction with the mu receptor, that opioid receptor. That is actually done supraspinally. In other words, it goes through the spine. So if somebody has osteoarthritis or problems with their back, their neck, or any of those sort of nerves that go through the spinal column, which is all of them except for the olfactory nerves, then massaging it, back massage is probably the very best way of using it, and you'll be able to leverage it. Just in case there are massage specialists, I will out there, I will just cover myself by saying that of course it would be contraindicated to massage if you've got sciatica, but just stroking the fir oil into the back is probably going to be more helpful because it will immediately get into the channel that goes to the brain. So there's my pain stuff. What about you?
For where I love the alpha-pinene, I'm a big diffuser. So I'm always, one of the first things I do in the morning is I set my tone for the day by what do I want to have in the diffuser. And in the morning, it's very often things like citruses and maybe florals. They're uplifting, or if I'm a little bit stressed, I normally go for a bit of a wood oil. But if you think about that, that's kind of, and I always call that my sunrise diffuser. Now, what about my sunset diffuser? This is when we get to the end of the day, and humans are the only species on this planet that ignores the sun. The only thing that happens when the sun goes down, we don't really change our behavior apart from flicking some lights on, and we carry on. But we're meant to start winding down. And it doesn't surprise me that so many people aren't getting the right quality and quantity of sleep, because when they finally go to sleep, their body's still on daylight kind of functioning. So what I love to do is I really lean into, if you come to my home anytime in the afternoon into the evening, you're going to smell a big fir or a big conifer or an evergreen tree. And the firs, because there are so many, I'm often diffusing them. So where I really got interested in them and the alpha-pinene and the beta-pinene was a book that's called Forest Bathing by Dr. Lee. Really amazing one that, we all know the kind of the culture, the general culture in Japan. They when they're at school, they study very, very hard, and they're even doing study before and after school. Work, there's that culture we work very long hours. And unfortunately, there's been issues with mental health in Japan because of that, that lack of work-life balance. So a few decades ago, the Japanese government started going, well, what can we do to counteract this? And they started a few different initiatives. One that was really, really successful was taking people out into the forest, into nature, and getting them to forest bathe. In Japanese, it's called Shinrin-yoku. Now, this is not just going for a bushwalk or going for a walk through the forest or trekking. What it is it's more removing all distractions. So you turn your phone off, and it's walking slowly, and it's more being in the present. So you almost have to engage your inner 6-year-old and go around and, look at things, touch at things, stop, listen, all that type of thing. And they found that when people were doing that on a regular basis, they were getting amazing outcomes. So these were things like more natural killer cells, less pain, sleeping better, better focus, better mood, healthier weight, lower blood pressure, better cholesterol levels, or like the kind of the list that's listed in this book of what they found in their studies was amazing. So I'm reading through and going, oh wow, that's great. I love being out in nature, and I'll have to, slow it down a little bit. And then they go on in this book about, so why does this happen? And what they discovered is that trees, the big evergreen trees, including the firs, release something called phytonicides, and these are released to attract pollinators, to detract pests, and also the trees communicate with each other through this way. So I'm reading about these phytonicides, and then they start listing them, and they're talking about alpha-pinene, beta-pinene, camphene, and D-limonene, and I'm like, I know what they are. They're in our essential oils. And the book then goes on to talk about when you can't be out in nature, bring nature into the home. And one of the best ways to do that is diffusing essential oils. So I very much so am always using those big tree evergreen oils, including the fir oils at the end of the day, just to help my body wind back down when I haven't had a chance to be out in nature. At the moment, this year, I'm living in the Middle East, and, we affectionately call it the sandpit. You don't really see trees. So I need to get that kind of dosage of good air and that type of thing just to help find my balance. And ideally, yes, I'd rather be out in the forest. But when we can't do that because of our location or because of our, our schedule for the day, that's where I really love bringing in these fir oils. And I've seen other studies where even diffusing a combination of different big tree oils or those kind of oil blend that matches the what you find in the air, people are finding their cortisol levels are dropping by 40% over one night of diffusion. So I am a big fan of the fir oils and so on because of that reason. So diffusion would be the main thing I would use them for.
So this isn't specifically about fur, but I read a really interesting study last week. I think I was right. I must have been writing about essentials for memory, I guess. I don't know that I would come across it. But there's been a study done, I think last year, but it was a very, very small study. It was only about 22 people, something like that. But they were able to prove that if you diffuse essential oils for 2 hours when you go to sleep, so if you've got like a diffuser that turns itself off, or you can put it on a timer, it improves memory. And so they were particularly interested in exploring this because obviously it's helpful for people who've got Alzheimer's and stuff. But paradoxically, they did the trial on people who were healthy, which seemed odd to me, but also quite useful for people like you and I who are healthy, and or maybe ladies who are struggling with menopause. My brain was just about to go there. Menopause memory. If you've got the brain fog, which I am thankfully coming out the other side of, but it is mayhem when you can't remember anything, that 2 hours of diffusion each night might be really helpful. And as you quite rightly say, a lot of the oils that we choose, that we say, oh, put some in the diffuser, tend to be quite uplifting oils. Well, they're stimulating as well, aren't they? What's interesting about fir oil is it's relaxing yet invigorating, which is a very odd combination. There's not many plants that do that, but so that's quite nice that you would relax to go to sleep but also probably be invigorated for the next morning. And as I say, we'll revisit that afterwards. But that 2 hours of diffusion is a really interesting piece of research, I thought. Obviously, if you're like me and you use a candle diffuser, do not go to sleep with that on. But electric diffusers on a timer is really useful, I think.
So you're giving us a bit of a deep dive into alpha-pinene. How does beta-pinene differentiate from that?
So I don't think there's that much research into beta-pinene. But what was really interesting, if anybody who can see both of us on the screen might have been interested to see my reaction when you said about phytoncides and how it interacts with insects and stuff like that. Obviously, for obvious reasons, I always look to see what's going on with the bees, and not that much. I can see a lot symbolically, but not that much physically. But ticks is very interesting. So actually, remind me, because it's going to go in the back of my head. In Australia, you've got a tick bush, have you not?
Yes, we do. Yes.
What plant is that?
Oh,
See, I'm in the same place. Doesn't matter then if you can't remember.
It might be Kunzia.
Yes, kunzia. Thank you. I knew it was like an oil that was like a prevalent oil. So as far as I know, we didn't really have a tick bush. But now there's research into, and this is kind of more interesting from a global perspective than an essential oil perspective, but still fascinating, that fir trees kill ticks in winter. So the trial was done, can't remember by whom or when, sorry, but they got some fir needles, don't say pine needles, fir needles. They got some fir needles in a petri dish with the ticks, and they did kill them, but it took ages, took days. So they decided to use some fir essential oil, and it was like the mafia came and culled them all straight away. It was like this massive kill really quickly, straight off. But it happened better, faster at colder temperatures. So interesting from the point of view that, like, we have things like Siberian fir and stuff like that where they're really cold. But it's almost like the world goes, so yeah, so I've kind of skipped there. What's interesting is it's the beta-pinene, not the alpha-pinene, it's the beta-pinene that does that. And normally, as I said earlier, you would have a ratio of alpha-pinene, beta-pinene, but in fir, it's the other way around. So it's almost like the fir trees have evolved to kind of cull the ticks in the winter, which I think is really, really interesting. So, I mean, that's really, if you've got like ticks around your house, or you have to go somewhere, if you want to make a repellent, if you're going on holiday or something like that, fir essential oil is really a good way to go. And of course, it's important for it's a nasty sort of vector for disease, isn't it? Lyme disease is a horrible thing, so that's important, I think. But otherwise, I don't think there's huge amounts. They're kind of similar to alpha-pinene, really.
Yeah. So I guess overall, if we're kind of doing a general sweep of the physical, we'd say pretty good for pain, pretty good for respiratory, pretty good for ticks, and pretty good for kind of relaxing and down regulating everything so that we can get a good night's sleep and then, you know, regain homeostasis overall in the body would be the overall physical arching for your fir oils. Would you agree with that and the alpha-pinene, beta-pinene?
I would say better than pretty good for pain. I would say extremely good for pain. And if somebody has got arthritis, probably the first choice, really. I'd always gone lavender juniper, but I've changed my perception to that. And I'd probably mix it with something like copaiba. I think it would be the first thing when somebody came through the door, right, we're going to try and regenerate that collagen. Now, I don't know. I don't think that would apply to the same kind of saggy wrinkles collagen, because that's chondrocytes between bones, I think. So I don't think it would be the same. And on the skin, it's really quite astringent anyway. So perhaps wouldn't go for that in terms of a general thing for skin care, but bone care, definitely.
I think what's important to know about collagen is, yes, we use collagen and people think about it. You know, it's a popular product at the moment for skin and hair and that. Our body uses collagen, like you said, in different places in our body, but they're different types of collagen. So when you're normally buying a collagen supplement, there is a whole range. Some are a waste of your money and some are better quality. You know, if they've only got one or two types of collagen, that's not going to be helping your bone collagen or your brain collagen or your joint collagen. That will be the one that your skin and your hair needs. So yeah, there are definitely different types of collagen.
Yeah. So the chondrocytes, as I say, is what builds that cushioning in the joints. So different things. So perhaps don't be misled to think it's going to help my wrinkles, because I think what it'll do is dry your skin. But it would be really good for cleansing your skin if you've got like grimy skin, especially when you do that inhalant where you've got a cold. What you get, the side effect, the byproduct of that, is you're going to clean out all your pores. So that's good as well.
But even if you're a bit of a DIYer and you like to make body washes, a lovely combination is Douglas fir and grapefruit. That smells divine. I've had that in a body wash before. I love it.
Yes, I can see how that would be lovely. And I'm going to say, and also better for men than women. So I'm going to go on to that now, if we're all right to do that.
You've been dangling that carrot, and I'm like, I'm not going to let us forget about that today.
I was going to swear then, and then I had to tell myself because I'm so excited by that. I'm so excited. I've been thinking about this for weeks and weeks and weeks since I found it out, because I think it's the ramifications are huge of this piece of data. So you talked about how the Japanese government were trying to expand, think across Asia, there's this kind of interest happening. And this is a Korean study that was done in a university because so many of their students were struggling mentally after lockdown and isolation. And we all know that obviously tree oils are uplifting. The only real ones prior to this that we had proper data on as to how and why and the specifics was cypress. So they decided, right, we're going to focus on fir, I would say on the back of what you were saying. Again, a very small study, 23 people in the study, so it needs to go much bigger. But a mixture of males and females, and of course they were all sort of university age, for want of a better expression, given that I'm a university, but you know, early 20s. And so they were given fir oil to inhale for 3 minutes and then questioned about it. And again, another kind of, in my opinion, another restriction of this is this should have been done over a period of maybe 6 weeks to see if the situation changed. You know, this might have just been a small snapshot. But they were, let me see if I can remember all of the different categories. They were asked about anxiety and tension, anger, hostility, depression, confusion, and restlessness, if I remember rightly. What was and vigor. What was fascinating is everybody felt more relaxed, more vigorous. So that matches exactly with what we were talking about, relaxing, invigorating. Yes. But what was interesting is the females said we feel different than the males after this, and their bodies showed that that was true. So apparently, and I didn't know this, there are several essential oils that men and women respond to differently, several different smells. I have not been able to identify what the others were yet, but I'm guessing this is probably to do with sex pheromones as much as anything else. You know, that would be interesting. Well, when they were questioned, the women said, well, we definitely feel less anxious and less tense. We feel less depressed. It's definitely had an antidepressant action on us. And we feel more vigorous. Good. The men said, wait, what? We feel way less tense and hostile. The women went, no, we still want to rip your heads off. And also the men said, yeah, but, and also we're lots less confused. And they were like, no, we're still befuddled. So they were completely different. And the men also said, and we don't feel less depressed. So to sum that up, both sexes found it invigorating. Women found it antidepressant and anti-anxiety. But men said, no, not antidepressant. For us, anti-hostility and anti-confusion, and the women didn't experience that. So I thought that was really fascinating because I've never come across that before. And I think that has massive ramifications right across aromatherapy now, because we say, oh, this is a relaxing oil. Is it though? Is it, or is it just relaxing to one sex or the other? Also, I want to know, I want to see that experiment done again for people who are non-binary and transgender.
Yeah.
Because how fascinating would that would say a lot about their brain. And what's more, we can say that the women, the fur activated their parasympathetic nervous system. They calmed right down. Men, no, sympathetic. So they almost went into fight and flight. So they were relaxed. But you could see their body was invigorated. The women said they felt invigorated, but no, they were still happy in the forest picking up leaves. The men were going off to battle with it. And I thought it was really fascinating to see.
That is fascinating. I love the suggestion you made about, looking at people on the gender spectrum. And even I remember in university when I was doing psychology, doing a paper on the brain differences between gay and straight males,
Yeah.
and things like the corpus callosum was transmitted data between better when people identified as homosexual as opposed to heterosexual. So there's a whole interest. We could go down a whole rabbit hole
Whole
there.
fascinating thing. I can remember when I wrote the stress book, being fascinated and kind of a bit nervous of writing about it, because that shows in itself over that 10 years the change of perspective over saying something like this. You could openly say it now, but 10 years ago maybe not. But when there was a study done of people watching a scary movie, and gay men's amygdala worked the same way as women's did in fear, but like a straight man's was different. So yeah, I think that this like response to smell through sexuality is really fascinating.
Yeah. So what we're really trying to say here, if anyone watching or listening right now has about 50,000 euros that they'd like to donate to us, we want to do some studies. So
well,
let
it's
us
not
know.
actually. I said that wrong, didn't I? I said through sexuality. It's not. It's through gender difference, isn't it? But
yeah, well, the sexuality and there's gender difference, so we could go on whole tangent. But
I do. But also, I mean, this whole idea of what do you identify as and feeling different, you don't realise the layers that somebody could feel different. I know I'm different to all the other women out there. I know I'm different to the men. So many different ways they must respond, and it's just hidden and we can't see it.
Yeah, and obviously that's a spectrum. And then when we're looking at how the fur essential oils would actually play out, what we're talking about today would be, it could be many different ways. But I think, and I want to share a bit of a story that I love, that I heard many years ago. It's a Native American story. And it was said that before humans were on Earth, the creator set a challenge for all the plants and the trees on the entire planet to stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights. Now, on the first night, pretty much all of them did it, no sweat at all. On the second night, some of the smaller plants and trees started to fall asleep. And night after night after night, more and more trees and plants couldn't fulfill the challenge. Until on the morning of the 8th day, only a few trees had survived and fulfilled the challenge. They were the spruce, the pine, the cedar, the cypress, and the juniper, and of course the fir. And the creator said, so from now on, you shall be known as the evergreen. And when all the other trees fall asleep in the winter and lose their leaves, you shall remain green, and you'll be there to protect all the animals I shall put on the earth, and as a symbol and as a virtual protection for all the humans as well. And I think on an emotional, stepping into a more holistic and spiritual manner, the firs really reach forward as that kind of protector. And there is even a tradition in North America in certain areas where Douglas firs are native, where when a child is born, they'll take the umbilical cord, they'll find a sapling of a young Douglas fir tree, split it and kind of intertwine it. And as that tree grows, it is absolutely like it becomes like the soul tree or the guide of that person. And whenever they have a challenge in life, that's their tree. Now, I don't have my own Douglas fir tree, but I know when I need that kind of comfort and that support, Douglas fir especially is an amazing one to pop in the diffuser just to feel, even if when you say the world is letting you down, normally it's people letting you down, you kind of get this feeling that there's something greater still supporting you.
I love that. I've never heard of that. I'd have definitely done that had I known that when my kids are born. Isn't that a beautiful ritual? Yes, and I think that I mean, I always say that the evergreens are like the sentinel trees. You go the way that they protect in warfare. You go out and you are hidden in the trees, and they seem to watch. And of course, as you say, they are emitting all of those phytoncides. I think that my favourite kind of story, a bit like that, is from. Do you know what the ogam trees are? So they're very ancient. It's very ancient Celtic lore about different trees. So they do readings a bit like rune readings with them, and so you have like the knowledge of the tree behind a reading, but also they use them as like a medicine tree as well. And now I'm going to get the pronunciation right now. heirloom is the fir or pine tree. And it talks about honesty and integrity, and the way it grows very straight, and that ability to be true to yourself, which is interesting after what we were just talking about, how you identify, but also to do with prophecy, and to do with dreaming and foresight. And the reason for that is because of the. Do you have fir trees, pine trees in Australia?
No, we do not. No.
No.
Well,
You might not know this then. So
I will tell a story about Douglas fir in a little while, but not natively. No.
Okay, so when it rains, the cones close beforehand, so you can forecast the weather by watching a fir tree. Wow. Because when it's sunshiny, they open right up. Because of course they want to disperse their seeds in the winter, and actually, obviously, it's not obvious. I live in the midst of the pine and fir forest here, and we've got actually it's a blue spruce outside, and around about May time on a summer's day, you have to move the car because there's so many seeds, and it looks like the tree's on fire. It's just so much smoke coming out of it, but on any summer day, the cones open right up, and then about 2 hours before it's raining, they suddenly go, whoop, and you can see the tree getting like putting its umbrella in, and so you know to get your washing in. So this is why it's thought of as being prophecy. That and what's interesting, if you look at like the Greek mythology and you see Dionysius, he's Thyrsus, his staff is a pine cone on the top and a fennel stalk. So this idea of of having foresight is very much connected with fir as well.
It's interesting, the firs, and I know sometimes the firs and spruces and pines, they get intermixed in stories and things like that. There's another story about the god Pan, the god of the wilderness, the satyr with the legs or hindquarters of a goat and the top half of a man. One of my favorite gods. He was a little bit wild. It's where the words things like panic come from. But he fell in love with a nymph. I think it's spelled Pity, so I don't know if it's pronounced Pity or Pitai or something like that. But was it Borealis? Yeah, Borealis, the god of the north wind, also fell in love with her. In the end, she decided Pan was a better option, and he got jealous and blew her off a cliff, and Pan ended up turning her into the fir tree. So you hear this beautiful story again of this, connection to Pan and connection to nature and finding that those answers in nature. And if we loop back to what I was saying about Shinrin Yoku, when we are out of balance, nature is our savior. And going back, and Pan was one of the very few gods that didn't have any temples built for him, because his temples were the big trees, the caves, the grottos, and around. And so the firs also, I think, are great to bring into our home, but also to remind us of the magic of what it can be to get out into nature as well.
Interesting that you talked about a woman that turned into a tree. That's very a Melissa thing. But I would definitely read that that's a rejection. That might be a plant to use if somebody's suffering the effects of rejection, the way that he was so angry he blew her off the side of the tree and she became a tree. So that I would say that was a medicine for rejection.
Yeah
Also, and especially like the guy that he's a god, not a female goddess. He's a god and he's angry. That's what we were talking about earlier, the anger and hostility. Right, we could reduce that with the fir. Yeah,
true. And also when you think it's Borealis, which is the north wind, which is obviously the cold wind in the northern hemisphere. So again, there's that tie into, when we're going through an angry time or a cold time or a winter time, and not like the story I told before, isn't just about, we can lean into the firs during those cold winter months, but we all have personal winters. We have a tough day, a tough week, a tough patch in our lives, and the firs are really great in that. So there's this whole tie-in of, whenever we're not quite feeling right on that emotional level, when we need that support from something in the world that's not going our way, the firs would be amazing for that.
I agree.
Yeah. I've got another story. It's story time today on our fellowship in essential oils. So this is one I learned when I was in North America. I was in Yosemite National Park, and we were looking at all the cones on the ground. and there were lots of Douglas fir around. And the guide there told us another story. So once upon a time, there was a wildfire going through the forest, and poor Mother Mouse was trying to find somewhere to hide her baby children. So she ran up to the bear and said, "Bear, bear, can you tell me where to put my children?" He's like, "I can't help you. I've got to get away from the fire." He ran off. "Wolf, wolf, can you help me find somewhere to hide my children?" "I can't help you. I'm trying to get away from the fire." "Ow, ow, can you help me?" said Mother Mouse. "I've got to save my children." "I can't help you. I've got to fly away from the fire." And eventually the fire got closer and closer and closer. And Mother Mouse started to realize that soon the fire would catch up. And, it looked like she knew what was going to happen. She started to cry. And then the Douglas fir tree leant down and actually said to her, "Have your children climb up into my branches and hide in my cones. And there they'll be safe forevermore." And this is actually a Douglas fir cone that I have, that I carry with me. And if you look, you'll see kind of poking out of each of the things are the hindquarters and the tail of the baby mice saving in there.
Oh, I love that.
So another thing of that kind of that story of that protection, and always when whether we're in a winter or whether the fire and something seems inevitable, you can find solace with the fir trees. So that theme comes throughout. We see it in Greek mythology. We see it in coming from North America as well. Obviously, the firs grow right across that northern hemisphere. So I think, yeah, that's why I love the firs so much.
I think also I should speak for the bees that fir trees and pine trees are some of their favourite things to forage in. People think that they like to forage in flowers, and of course they do. But they like to be in the fir and the pine trees and other trees of the ilk because they like to collect resin. And of course, they take the resin back and create propolis, which is their antibacterial protection for the whole hive. So that in itself tells us a lot about the medicine of the fir tree, that it is, it's very protective. And of course, we haven't said it, but it is really good for the immune system generally. We were talking about those phytocides that you were talking about. Same thing. The bees are just using them, on a physical level rather than them being airborne. But yeah, it's amazing. And I have to say, like, it's blood clot day today. I didn't intend for it to be blood clot day, but I was so ill when I had my first blood clot. I actually did nearly die, and I had to carry Dexter for 9 months with this illness, and he couldn't really be attacked aggressively until after he'd been born. So I spent a year pretty much in bed, and I was really very poorly. So then we kind of go forward 2 years. Dexter was 3 when we moved to Ludlow. And it was only when I moved here that I started to get really a lot better. And this house is surrounded by fir and pine trees. And I do think that the air generally, of course, is cleaner than where it was. I was near one of the busiest intersections in the country. But the air is clean, but the air is really primed with pinene around here. And it really improved my lungs no end.
Yeah, wow. We've obviously talked, and we've kind of said that there's different different species of fir trees. What I thought I'd just take a moment with the 5 that I've worked with, I find you can kind of reach for them in different ways as well. Douglas fir, which I was saying before, I actually get my Douglas fir from New Zealand, which is a bit of an unusual place, but some bright spark decided that Douglas fir trees might be really great to grow as like the lumber industry in New Zealand. And that bright spark was right in one way. They do grow well. In fact, they grow 25 times faster than they do in their native land of North America. And they became a pest, multiplying too quickly. And obviously the acidity of the needles is taking out all the natural flora. So I was actually in Queenstown earlier this year, which is a city or a town in New Zealand. And it feels like you're in Europe. There's these Douglas fir trees everywhere, but they're now starting to chop them down, turn them into essential oil. So we're allowing the natural flora to grow back, but we're obviously getting an amazing essential oil out of that as well. So the Douglas fir trees have this really, for me, they're really refreshing, and I kind of say they're nurturingly protective. But then when we look at something like Siberian fir, That is a tree that's native to Siberia and spends the majority of its life um, under snow. And I find this really quite interesting. When I first got my first Siberian fir, um, I was actually on a cruise around Alaska. And so it was very snowy in that way. And I still, whenever I smell Siberian fir, it takes me to that memory. But I like to think of this connection to snow being part of Siberian fir's medicine. And when you think about snow, it's almost like a physical manifestation of white light. When you think when the snow falls, it kills off all the old and the weak in the animals and the plants and that type of thing. And then if you've ever been where it's surrounded by snow, it brings this quietness. And then when the snow melts, it brings new life. And when we think about visualizing white light from a healing capacity, we bring it down, it gets rid of all the old, and it brings new as well. So I almost kind of feel like Siberian fir is a beautiful oil that is almost the energetic manifestation or an essential oil of white light. Now, silver or white fir, very, very similar in aroma. The chemistry is quite similar. That's very similar, but I find it's got more of an angelic note to it. The Himalayan fir, which is grows at very high altitudes, I find is really quite lifting when when life's getting boring, when you feel that you're in the doldrums, when you're often negative. Reach for your Himalayan fir there. And balsam fir is a really interesting one because that oil comes from the bark. You do get a leaf oil, but I work more with the bark oil. Now, when we look at our resinous essential oils like frankincense or copaiba or myrrh, the tree is normally injured somehow to extract that out. With balsam fir, their trees when they're young, the trunks are actually quite smooth. But as they get older, the resin kind of comes out to the exterior, and then when that's steam distilled, you get this amazing amazing essential oil from it. And this is a really great one. I find it's a lovely one for women in dealing with getting older. And, there is kind of this general attitude, and I'm generalizing here, that women, as they get older, in Hollywood, women lie about their age because the older you get, the less attractive you are. But balsam fir, the young trees have no value in their essential oil because the balsam or the resin hasn't come out. Whereas as they get older, that's where their value is. And it teaches us to value ourselves and what we do bring to the surface as we get older as well. So all of them have this very, whether it be connecting with your angels, bringing in white light, feeling safe and protected, they've still got that theme, but getting to know each one, you'll find different notes in it. And obviously, when they come from different locations around the world, that's going to make a big difference as well.
Wow, that was fantastic teaching. So I'd just like to pick up a thread there, your Hollywood thread. We've proved that it makes you feel more vigorous. We've proved that it will make you feel less depressed if you're a female. We were also proven that it can rebuild the collagen in your body, in your bones. All of that really matches to feeling much younger as a woman, I think.
Yeah, very true. Now, I wanted to check with you. You kept on saying, and I'll talk about that later. I kept trying to keep tabs in my head of all the things you're going to talk about later.
I think I've done them all.
You got them all? Okay, cool. So let's look at astrology. What astrologically, where would you delegate the firs?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So I am, on this occasion, I'm not going to give an answer. I'm going to defer to you.
Okay. If we were going to go for general astrology, I think possibly Saturn. And that's why I was kind of thinking when we were talking about the father energy and you were talking about, the effect on men and all that type of thing, an interesting kind of play there. But I actually, and I've talked about it in other episodes as well, there's obviously the main planets, but then there are dwarf planets, there's asteroids and so on. And there is an asteroid actually known as Pan. And Pan, it's really interesting to see where its placement is in people's birth charts. And I find when it's in a prominent place, like near one of the planets when you were born or near your ascendant or something like that, you have this real drawing to nature. And so I actually work with that Pan energy and that astrology when I'm working with the fir oils because of that mythology as well, type of thing. So I'm going to say Saturn or the asteroid Pan, something a little bit different.
What do you think about the idea of Pluto?
Why?
God of regeneration.
True, yeah.
Connection with the underworld.
We Yeah,
we're talking about, I mean, it's the Latin name of cypress, but sempervirens means always living, which is the name for an evergreen.
yeah,
So to me, that feels Plutonian and kind of how it has a cleansing act on the blood, although that is weak. I'm grasping, I gotta say. I do like
you
Saturn.
are. Yeah,
I like Saturn.
yeah. For that kind of also, I would definitely say Cyprus. Definitely, that would be a Pluto one. With the furs, I think there's still that strength and almost maybe that that discipline that we get from Saturn as well. So that possibly could be the reason. Chakra wise, what would you go?
Well, anything that's to do with the respiratory system, I always say heart chakra from a physical. But I think I'm going to go third eye.
Gotcha. Yeah, for that prophecy kind of aspect.
Yeah, and the way that it's like a sentinel thing, and it definitely clears your thoughts, doesn't it? You know, if you were struggling to concentrate, or you were distracted by anxiety and you got exams coming or something, it's a really good thing that to like bring your thoughts back to center, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I would tend to go crown or even above crown, so something like the soul star chakra, which is your connection to. We often think, that's to guides, to totems, to ancestors, to angels, and so on. But the protection that the fir trees bring us when we are feeling like our Monday or our physical life isn't quite going to plan. I think they kind of bring that otherworldly sense of protection as well, and that sense that there is more than just the physical. So I really love them for working with even that facilitating, connecting with your angels, connecting with your guides, connecting with the divine in whatever form each individual loves to connect with it. I love them for that. So that's where I tend to place
I
pretty
like
much
that.
all the fur oils. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. You did better than me today on that.
Okay, fair enough.
So what do you think you might talk about in the masterclass for this?
Oh, there is so much. Like I probably could do a whole masterclass just on the furs. Let's have a look. I'd love to get feedback on what people would like to dive into more
Well,
on it
that's
as
why I asked the
well.
question, because I had some feedback yesterday.
Yeah.
One of our ladies, Sharon, couldn't come because she was working, and so she said, I've just watched the masterclass and I didn't know anything about what you taught about the meridians last week. Please, will you do more about the meridians? So I think that we can definitely do something about how we can use improve lung action through the meridians and through these conifer oils from my part.
Well, I'm going to be at the masterclass just to learn about that. I'll sit with that. I love working with all the different evergreens at different times of the moon. Maybe we'll talk about that. But yeah, please send feedback through. Remember that our masterclass is happening this month on the 26th of October. It's this time we've got it as I think we've got it the European and Australian friendly time.
Morning.
Yep.
It's morning UK time for me. Yeah.
Yep. So morning if you're in Europe or the Middle East. It's the afternoon or evening if you're in Australia. Americans, this is the month where you get a little bit of a raw deal, but you can still buy a ticket and get the replay. And then next month, we're going to do it in your evening time, which will be, or your morning time, which will be really convenient for you as well. This is the joy of time zones.
If you are in the US and you know you're not going to get up, because that's a bad plan. Trust me, I've done it. It's not great. If you are, don't forget to send us your questions. This is what I want you to talk about in the masterclass so that we can cover your questions and then you can have your message sent back to you on the recording.
Exactly. And you will find the link wherever you're watching or listening to this down below. And there's a discount code. So don't forget the discount code that you'll find down there as well. Make sure you use that. So I think we've done fur justice.
I think we've done fur justice as well. I knew as soon as we said it last week, I said, I've got interesting things to say about fur. I think I've probably peaked now. Anything else will become more boring in the future. But I just want to do one shameless promotion before we go. Anybody who doesn't know, you can get this book for free on Amazon and good ebook platforms. It's a big book with about 100 different essential oils and 60 conditions. So I know we had at the masterclass some newbies last week who had just started using essential oils and perhaps they don't know to go and get that. So if you go to my link tree, there's a link to go and get it. Please go and get it. There's so much information there about how to use essential oils and importantly, the contraindications, the safety levels, all of that stuff. So if you are a newbie, or even if you know a lot about essential oils, this is a great resource. Please, it took me a long time to write it, so please do use it if it's something that you if you haven't got much written in front of you. It's a good textbook.
So you've been relaxing, listening to us bang on for a little while. So now the hard work begins. You need to book your masterclass ticket. You need to go grab that book. And we would love to know which is your favorite fur oil. So please leave us a comment and let's see which one is the world's most favorite fur oil. Is there one that wins above the rest, or is it a bit of an even field? But we will see you next week.
Mine is Siberian. So I loved learning all that from you.
Yes, I'd go Douglas fir. See, there we go. Yeah. We will see you again next week when we dive into another essential oil. Thank you so much for joining us on Fellowship of Essential Oils. Until next week, take care.
Bye-bye.